Hello, and welcome back to Progressive Moves. I'm Andrew. Topic on this one, Israel-Hamas conflict. So I'm going to share a video from CTV National News, Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024, giving a bit of information on what's going on there, and then we'll jump into a lot more information that goes along with this. So let's jump right into it.
One single drone attack has the power to fully ignite the Middle East conflict. A senior Hamas leader has been killed in Lebanon. Saleh al-Aruri was taken out at a building in Beirut in what is being called a surgical strike. CTV's Judy Tren has more on the man who was the target.
The aftermath of an assassination. 57-year-old Saleh al-Aruri was killed in the drone strike. He founded Hamas's military wing. He was second in command and designated a global terrorist by the U.S.
No one is safe. They launched an attack, a bloody, deadly attack on Israel on October 7th, and Israel is out to get all of them.
Al-Aruri was living in Lebanon, in a Beirut suburb, controlled by another Iranian-backed group, Hezbollah.
I think this just really highlights what the Secretary General had just said about the dangers of the spillover of this conflict in the wider region.
Protests erupted tonight in the West Bank, where al-Aruri funded and directed militants. Israel has not claimed direct responsibility, but had previously promised it would hunt down Hamas leaders overseas. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told soldiers the campaign won't end until Hamas no longer functions as a governing and military body. But thousands of troops are being withdrawn from northern Gaza, partially because they're needed to sustain the Israeli economy. More than 300,000 reservists were drafted, nearly 15% of the country's workforce. Fighting is now concentrated in the south, near Khan Yunis, where the remaining 130 hostages are believed to be held. Former hostage negotiator Gershon Baskin says al-Aruri was also involved in the current negotiations with Hamas to release Israeli captives. Al-Aruri's death throws negotiations into disarray.
This does not fare well for the Israeli hostages, of course. Military pressure is not going to release the hostages.
Meanwhile, Israel is facing a legal challenge to its war. At the International Court of Justice, South Africa has accused Israel of mounting a campaign of genocide in Gaza. Israel is contesting the claim and argues that South Africa is complicit in Hamas' efforts to destroy the Jewish nation. Morella.
All right, Judy. Canada is offering visas to people who want to get out of Gaza and a family here, but there will be a limited number of visas available. How many?
The federal government says a maximum of 1,000 Palestinian relatives of Canadians will be granted these temporary visas. These visas are only good for 3 years, and to qualify, Palestinian Canadians have to have the financial means to support their relatives for that time period. Immigration Minister Mark Miller says Canada cannot guarantee safe passage out of Gaza, even if these family members are selected. And Morella, the National Council of Canadian Muslims, says the need is much greater and there shouldn't be a cap.
All right, Judy. And on
All right, so some information in there. Israel's pulling out quite a bit of troops, and just from other things that I've seen, they're pulling out the troops that they are so they can get back to their normal jobs and get the economy kind of boosted, because it's definitely had an effect in Israel in that sense. Okay, moving on from that though. So this conflict has been going on since October 7th. And yes, before I say anything else, Hamas is a terrorist organization, is labeled a terrorist organization, and rightfully so. I don't want anyone thinking that I'm, giving sympathy to Hamas or trying to make an excuse for Hamas. No, not going to happen. But in the same breath, I will tell you that, sorry, but the way that Israel's government has been doing things, and I want to make sure I clarify, the government of Israel has been doing things. Absolutely, you know, is on the same level as Hamas in how I see things. Okay, so October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel, took, I believe, estimates of. Sorry, I gotta look at my notes here quick. I believe 240 hostages. Estimates for Israeli casualties on October 7th, anywhere between 1,200 to 1,400. Okay, so Israel has a right to defend itself, just like any other nation, any other country. I will never argue that Israel does not have the right to defend itself. Okay? Do I believe they need to do something about Hamas? Yes, because the Hamas ideology essentially ethnic cleansing against the Jewish people. Okay, so their ideology is very, very wrong. So something needs to be done. How it gets done is where the issue lies and where a lot of people around the world are having the issues. Okay, so when this all first started, Israel had said they're using tunnels under Gaza. They're, tunnel networks that they're using that bombs can't do anything about, bombs can't get to. So as long as they're in the tunnels, the bombing doesn't do anything. We're going on 2 months. Sorry, 3 months. 3 months of this conflict. In 3 months of this conflict, after Israel saying that bombing isn't going to do anything. So, Israel at this point has dropped 29,000 bombs on Gaza. Estimated amount of damage is about 80 to 85% infrastructure damage. The same amount, 80 to 85% of the population, civilians, clarify that, civilians have been displaced. Okay, so keep that in mind. Gaza's population is estimated roughly 50% children. So I'm going to stop there. Roughly 50% of the population in Gaza are children, so under the age of 18. One of Israel's points is that the Gazan people need to rise up against Hamas. Hamas was put into place, not put into place, Hamas was elected in 2007. And from there, like we've seen in other countries, they abolished democracy of any sort and essentially regime, okay? Authoritarian regime. We've seen it in other countries throughout history. It happens. So with that in mind and with that context, that was in 2007 that Hamas came to power, okay? Were voted in. And 50% of the population in Gaza are children at this point, under the age of 18. So there goes that. I mean, you can't vote in. You can't vote in. There's no diplomacy. There's no democratic system set up. So you can't vote in that sense in general. But when you have 50% of your population under the age of 18, that makes a huge difference as well. Okay, so that massive issues with what Israel's trying to say. Israel, within the video that I showed you, so Israel said that they haven't taken direct credit for that leader within the Hamas, but they definitely have said more and shown more in terms of that than they keep claiming, because They've hit multiple hospitals. They've hit churches. They've hit refugee camps of people that have been displaced. Going towards the border with Egypt, going south like they've been told, and those camps are getting hit by bombs too in the south. Israel said, "Oh, go south. It's safe," but they still bombed it. They still it's safe there, but we're still gonna bomb there. We're gonna bomb where people are trying to shelter and get supplies, get food, okay, water, things that they don't have right now. That's another point. Israel has been so tight knit on making sure, only X amount of supplies get into Gaza. But before this conflict, there were hundreds of trucks going into Gaza a day. Hundreds. Now, I think they've been lucky to get a couple hundred at most. Okay, the population is it's most densely populated area on the face of the planet. Okay, I think rough estimates, and I apologize. It is I didn't write it down, but it's between 2 to 3 million, I believe, in these small. A lot of times I hear 25 by 25 kilometer area, or it's a small area. Anyway, so all these things combined, and again, I'm not making excuses for Hamas. I'm not trying to stick up for Hamas. What I'm trying to do is stick up for the civilian population in Gaza, right? Like I brought up 29,000 bombs is what they've dropped in Gaza. For comparison, in 2018, the United States dropped 7,362 bombs in Afghanistan. And that was in a whole year. Okay, so we are now what, one, two, three, four, 4 times the amount in a year in Afghanistan is the amount of bombs that Israel has dropped in Gaza. Okay, 2019 in Afghanistan was 7,423. Okay, so even with 2 years combined in the Middle East and Afghanistan, the United States in 2 years didn't drop anywhere near the amount of bombs that Israel has dropped in Gaza. So context there, and don't get me wrong, Hamas has been launching missiles towards Israel. So I'm not trying to cover for Hamas, or I'm not trying to make excuses. There is a conflict. Both sides need to stop. Okay, both sides essentially at this point have been set on, the other has to go. This is, in my opinion, this is nothing but a continuation of a holy war or a religious war that's been going on for hundreds of years, if not longer. Okay, so at this point, there's really the whole argument over the land has been an ongoing for hundreds of years. Look at what Israel's done in terms of, really, it's been an occupation in Gaza for years at this point. Where, yeah, the borders, there's patrols, military patrols, Israeli military patrols in Gaza. They control the borders. They're walled up on the Israel-Gaza border, quote unquote. Okay, Israel has control over the sea around Gaza, and the other side is the border with Egypt. So Israel has essentially had control over that Gaza area for years at this point. Okay, so military occupation, and they say, oh, because they can't police themselves, or they don't have the ability, or they don't have yada yada yada, excuse after excuse after excuse. And now we're seeing in the UN, where the UN is trying to make do something, have votes to, try and get a ceasefire of any sort, or get more aid into Gaza, or get boots on the ground in terms of humanitarian aid and finding out what's actually going on in Gaza. And everything's been vetoed from Israel and the United States. So the United States is just essentially, backing everything that Israel's doing. And again, I'm not Hamas is in the wrong here too, but where my mind is not Hamas, is not Israel, okay, as a government sense or as entities of power. Where my thought process and where my mind goes is civilian death toll, okay, civilian life that's being lost. Yes, okay, Israel has lost civilians, Israel has lost military personnel, Israel has lost life as well, and it's not needed. None of this is needed. Okay, so again, earlier I said that Israeli citizens, the death toll was anywhere between 1,200 to 1,400 on October 7th. Altogether now in the going on 3 months, and I'm giving low number and high number on this, is 20,000 to 22,000 dead in Gaza in 3 months. So not even 3 months, really. So, and that doesn't include numbers of people that might be stuck under rubble, and unfortunately pass while they're stuck under the rubble. Okay, because there's no way for them to get them out, because there's, Israel isn't allowing fuel in. Israel's had control over Gazan water, hydro, imports, all of that for years. And they've actually cut the hydro, they've cut the water, they've cut these resources to the civilian population. Okay, so when they say they're going after Hamas, but they cut resources to the civilian population, sorry, but your argument at that point just goes right down the tube, because now you're just intentionally inflicting more suffering and more pain upon civilians within the area. Okay, yeah, and there are people in the streets in Gaza and West Bank. West Bank's been getting hit from Israel as well, and military action in the West Bank as well. And with Israel doing everything that they are, it's radicalizing more people when it comes to looking at Israel, when it comes to maybe more people joining Hamas. I'm sorry, but, and again, I don't support Hamas. None whatsoever. No support for Hamas. Okay? But when you're doing these sort of things, you're radicalizing more people. You're bolstering, right? You can go in with your military. They've done that. But like they've said many times, the tunnels aren't affected by bombs. So stop bombing civilians, stop bombing things that are meant to help the civilian population get through this. Like, the whole world's looking at you and telling you to stop. Why are you still doing that? Yeah, it's 2024 now. Let's see what happens with this. Essentially, in my opinion, there needs to be a two-state solution. There has to be. Get rid of Hamas. Get them out of there. Do what you got to do in terms of Hamas. But leave the civilians alone. And once Hamas is dealt with, then two-state solution. Okay? This is, like I said, this is nothing but an ongoing religious war that's gone on forever. And it just needs to stop. And, criticizing Israeli government isn't being anti-Semitic. I want to put that out there too, all right? Because you're criticizing the government. You're not criticizing Jewish people. You're criticizing the Israeli government. And that's what the Israeli government has been doing. Within that video, you saw that West Africa is calling for investigation and saying that they're, Israel is partaking in a genocide, which, whether they're meaning to or not, if they want to say that, it's all casualties of war sort of thing, it's collateral damage, okay, fine. But it also doesn't, it doesn't stop the fact that, you're killing that many civilians, which I will also add, roughly 50% of the civilian casualties in Gaza have been children. So are you going after Hamas? Because killing children isn't going to help your cause. Okay, but Israel's pretty much said that this is anti-Semitic. This is you're against the Jewish people. No, we're looking at what you're doing, and we're calling out what you're doing. Okay, yeah, you've had definitely some atrocities happen to the Jewish community in history, and nobody will ever dispute that. But that does not give you the right now to do the same thing to other people. And when the rest of the world calls it out, pointing the finger and saying we're anti-Semitic. No, we're not anti-Semitic. What we are is not wanting to see civilian life needlessly lost. Anyway, the war the conflict needs to stop, and the only way to really do it, and you're not going to see it, is because both sides are far right wing entities, governments, power, however you want to say that. They're both far right, so neither one of them are going to give up their positions, or neither one of them are really going to do much to sit down and talk until we see new leadership on both sides. And Israel's population has been saying since the October 7th attack, because there's been information now surfaced that, yeah, the Israeli government knew what was going on. The Israeli government knew that there was going to be an attack and didn't do much about it. So the people of Israel want Netanyahu to step down. They want a new person in charge because of that, because of other things that he's done. Like the Israeli people are, out in the streets, and they want things to be different right now. Right? So even its own population is against its government. So how can it be anti-Semitic when, we're standing with people within your own country, within the Jewish community, whether it's in Israel or around the world, that are calling for Israel to cease fire. Stop bombing innocent people. Till next time, guys.